police arrested 66-year-old Bruce McArthur of the City of Toronto. He has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in relation to Mr. Kinsman and Mr. Essen. And we believe he is responsible for the deaths of other men who have yet to be identified.
2 to begin, and there were more. Bruce McArthur would eventually be charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. News of the killings and arrests rocked, of course, Toronto largely, but notably Gay Village, because most of the men had ties. And as you know, this week, Bruce McArthur in court for pretrial motions. His trial is expected to begin on January the 6th of 2020, so next year. Much work to do between now and then. But we thought we'd spend some time this morning on this anniversary, on a story which was not just one of the main ones in Toronto, but certainly one that was of interest to Canadians, with the man who heads the homicide unit at the Toronto Police Force, and who you heard there, and who has been front and center on this story all through, Inspector Hank Idsinga. Thanks so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it. 10:25, where are you going to be?
10:25, I intend to be on Mallory Crescent.
The property where the remains were found, where so much of your investigation has been based. Why do you want to be there with the family at that time?
Well, it's out of respect to the victims, to the community, and to the members of the investigative team who worked so hard to bring the case to a conclusion. And the homeowners have invited us, and we're very grateful to them for making that effort to invite us. They're spectacular people, and we want to be there to pay our respects.
What a year for them. You can only imagine. You've been so accessible to us throughout this year, and thank you for giving us some time on this anniversary morning. How would you sum up or characterize the year?
Well, January, and I'll backdate it by one day, but January 17th of 2018 was the day that we uncovered evidence which led us to develop grounds to arrest Mr. McArthur. And from January the 17th right through to July until we recovered the last of those 8 sets of remains was just a very tumultuous, non-stop, labor-intensive period of time for not just myself, but all the investigators working on it. Obviously, very shocking to the community, very gratifying to be able to develop that closure for everyone. It was a case that we were working on for a very long time, as everybody knows. So.
Come back to the gratifying point with me in a moment, but the actual investigation itself, you've talked often about how this is unprecedented. And is that in terms of the size and the scope of this?
I think unprecedented in terms of everything. We've had investigations, and we continue to run investigations with an awful lot of manpower and an awful lot of work being put into those investigations. But to deal with a investigation like this where so many people in the community have been affected, so many people, not just in the City of Toronto, especially the City of Toronto, but this case affected people across the world. We dealt with people in Europe, we dealt with people in the Middle East, all in relation to this investigation, and from that perspective, it surely is unprecedented.
The moment for a city watching this unfold, I think for many, was when we learned of the 8 victims that 7 remains had been buried in planters. The indignity of that.
Right.
It was amazing for the public. You, I know, were there in the morgue when they cut those planters open for that discovery.
Right.
That moment for you.
That moment for me, and to put it into perspective, when we arrested Mr. McArthur on January the 18th, we had no idea where the victims' remains were. And that, of course, causes a lot of stress and a lot of angst, and puts quite an onus on us to try and recover these victims' remains. And the morning in the morgue, where the planters were finally thawed enough where we could A, x-ray them, and then B, the pathologist could crack them open with the forensic anthropologist, I'll never forget it. It was a definitely defining moment in my 30 years of policing.
To get to that moment, and to get to the moment where we are now, where he is before the courts, you certainly faced a lot of questions and a lot of criticism over the time because of, I mean, it is the size and scope, but I don't know if it's a what if. The fact that there was not a warning earlier that there was a serial killer in the community's midst, notably in the gay community's midst. The gay community, the Southeast Asian community, very critical of the fact that it took a long time to get to Bruce McArthur, and they felt that not everybody was equal in the system of law and order, that you weren't acting quickly because it was a gay situation, it was a Southeast Asian situation. Was that criticism fair, and what impact did that have on you?
Well, it had a huge impact, and I think if you look back, and I was just discussing it again, at the investigations, the first missing person went missing in 2010. And the amount of work that went into trying to figure out what had happened, and leading up into 2012, where we did uncover some evidence, where we assembled a project team, a task force, to investigate through 2012 and 2013 until we could exclude that evidence. And by the time we were done there, we had 3 missing persons, but we still had no evidence as to what had happened to them. We had no evidence that there was a serial killer. There was lots of speculation, and there were lots of theories going around. But until we get to the point in time where we can actually say we've got a serial killer, we just can't say that. So if you look back at the newspaper headlines in the summer of 2013, it was front page news. We put it out there. We put it out there that there were 3 missing persons. We plastered flyers all over the city and the village downtown at Church and Wellesley, and it was on the front page of every single paper. And then fast forward to 2017 and 2018, and people say, why weren't we warned? And we said, well, we did put this out there. We did warn people, and people can speculate all they want in the ensuing time as to whether there's a serial killer or not, but until we have evidence of that, that's not something that we can say.
What are relations like today, 1 year on?
We've made some changes, obviously, in the way we deal with missing persons. There's more changes to come. There's a missing persons review that's underway. We've got some very good relationships in the community. We have an LGBTQ officer dedicated to that, Daniel Botno, who does some fantastic work. And it's gotten to the point where I've developed some relationships myself with some of the members of the community. And I walked into another media studio this morning where some were, and had a great conversation with them. So,
the gratifying part, after a year of, I'm sure, as you said, fatigue and work and personal toll, what's been the most gratifying for you personally?
I think the most gratifying moment was that day in July where we went down into the ravine and found the remains of the 8th individual. And to finally say, okay, we've got them all back now. We've got all the victims' remains back. No one's unaccounted for. We can return those remains to the family. And that was a key moment, I think, when it comes to closure and being gratified by the results of the investigation.
That part closed, but there's still one question that's out there, and that is why? If indeed this leads to a conviction for Bruce McArthur, do you understand why he did this? Will we ever understand that?
It would be very interesting, I think, for someone other than me to do an analysis on that and maybe get an answer to that question. I don't think we'll ever really know why or be able to rationalize why, which can be the case in a lot of murder investigations. Not just Mr. McArthur, but it's hard to rationalize something that's irrational.
Thanks very much for speaking to us so often over the year and for helping us understand this and for joining me today. I appreciate it.